Hey, welcome to the Rochford Files. Here with your host Andrew Rochford, coming to you live from Denver. And it's another wild Wednesday in this fucked up empire known as the United States. And I'm glad I got a pretty good, pretty loaded show today. And so there will be a lot of stories to cover, which is good because I prefer to cover the more topics I have the chance to cover, the better. Even though I do also like the shows where I could pretty much focus in on one or two topics, I also like when the news flow permits me being able to cover several different ones. And that's that. Also, let's see, what else should I say? Oh yeah, I still think I'll probably go with the whole NBA free agency stream. Right now, my initial thought is tomorrow, and I'll be live, and I'll have that. I'll set up the Twitter Spaces for that one. That way, other people can get in and talk about what's gone down from then. Especially now since Summer League just ended yesterday. And the good news is the last few shows, they've been absent of sports-related topics. The good news is that they're back. And I got a few sports related topics to cover on today's show. And that's good because that's part of the niche I'm trying to create here on the Rochford Files is someone who covers more of those stories, because I used to be a sports guy first before last year made me into more of a political guy. But even though I haven't tweeted a lot about sports lately, I'm still someone who likes sports and whatnot. Just going through a weird time right now. I'm sure I'll get back into that routine. Let's get started with today's show. Alright, so yesterday this story came out from the Daily Caller about Hope Solo saying that Megan Rapinoe would almost bully teammates into kneeling during the national anthem. And let's jump down to the quotes. So first off, Hope Solo and Megan Rapinoe had been on the U.S. women's national soccer team for several years, and the former goalie wasn't overly impressed with the national anthem protests that swept through the team. In fact, Solo, who was removed from the team before kneeling consumed sports, thinks Rapinoe pushed players to do it. And here's what she said. I think this kneeling thing can be very divisive. I've seen Megan Rapinoe almost bully players into kneeling because she really wants to stand up for something in her particular way, Solo said on Goals All of Us, the U.S. women's soccer show, when discussing Rapinoe and the national anthem protest. She also added, I think the rhetoric surrounding this team has been both divisive and inclusive. I guess that's kind of where we are in politics in this day and age. And let's see if there's anything else to... Yeah, that's the main point right there. And one of the common takes that I've seen from liberals is invalidating Hope Solo's statement here because of the fact that she left the team before the whole kneeling before the national anthem started. And the problem with that statement is you are trying to imply that she would no longer have a connection on the team that could give her an insight or perspective of what's going down here. So first off, even though Hope Solo is a flawed person with her own personal problems here, I'm going to take that statement at its word, assuming that it's true here, because what I do think the problem is the idea that Megan Rapinoe, saying here that the United States trying to force her teammates into doing it. And that is not a good look for her, if that is true, because what I would want is people who are genuine about putting their support behind actions such as kneeling during the national anthem. And I'm very supportive of the right to acknowledge the national anthem however you like. However, I do have a problem with forcing people into doing it, because I want people who are genuine about it. But also the other issue is, over time, the value of kneeling during the national anthem has gone down. Specifically, early into the Trump term, when he had that rally speech in Alabama where they pretty much said that sons of bitches should be removed from the football field that kneeled, and that all ramped up the kneeling during the national anthem again. And while that part wasn't bad, the problem is the action got devalued by it turning into a social media challenge. Then what you saw last year during the George Floyd protest was the kneeling during the national anthem kicked back up again. But the thing is, it's mainly a virtue signaling action which lacked follow-up action, especially from the overwhelming majority of athletes who are kneeling during the national anthem. But this also... So I do disagree with the idea of Rapinoe forcing her teammates into this, especially if it's something that they truly don't want to do. And I think it is also a thing that the other athletes in other sports get better, is not trying to force people who genuinely don't want to be involved in this. And what you're going to see in this next article is Subway franchisees want to see the company drop her endorsement deal with the company. And this came up, I believe, sometime last week. Let's go through a few of the quotes. Boycott Subway until Subway fires the anti-American Megan Rapinoe, the creep who kneels for a beloved national anthem. A Wisconsin store operator read from a note a customer taped to the glass door of his restaurant. The ad should be pulled and done with. It gets tired apologizing. The Subway company doesn't own any of its 22,000 stores, but charges franchisees 4.5% of their revenue for the use of its brand and national advertising campaigns. These campaigns, an Arizona franchisee argued at the forum, should use the revenue to advertise the product, not politics. Spending the money to make a political statement is completely and totally out of bounds, the franchisee said. Representatives of the North American Association of Subway franchisees reportedly told the restaurant owners that they had previously received complaints about Rapinoe's image and have passed them down to the company's top management. Okay. I had a bunch of franchisees calling on me on this today. A lawyer representing Subway franchisees similarly confirmed to the New York Post they are trying to get the ads pulled. And if our soccer team headed by a group of leftist maniacs wasn't woke, they would have won the gold medal instead of bronze, Trump said in an email to supporters. The woman with the purple hair played terribly and spends too much time thinking about radical left politics instead of doing her job. And this is the type of stupid cancel culture bullshit that you see with the right, the same right that is supposedly most vocally against the idea of cancel culture, but most vocally in favor of using it against the liberals and the left. And just so you know, this is the type of this angle right here is the stupid culture war bullshit that you see from the right with liberals like Megan Rapinoe. So, with that being said, just to get down to it and say that this is really an issue of a problem with what that you have with fake woke celebrities like Megan Rapinoe is the fact that she is supposedly in support of the original reason for kneeling, like police brutality and better treatment for Black Americans in this country. But the problem is, when it comes down to it, here's some criticism from the left. Megan Rapinoe is not to me, someone who is going to be a genuine fighter when it comes to the original purpose of how the kneeling for the national anthem started with Colin Kaepernick. And just so I got curious before the show, and I wondered if Rapinoe was a Joe Biden supporter during the primary, because what I noticed is how quickly she went from being a Biden support, how quickly she went from, and I was surprised to actually learn that she supported Elizabeth Warren during the primary, because given how quickly she uh, did a campaign video with Joe Biden, I really was convinced that she was one of those celebrities who supported Joe Biden even back in the primary. But this is also the thing that isn't surprising about the warring Democrats is how quickly that they fall in line behind uh, the vote blue no matter who type of mindset when it comes to the Democratic Party. So this is why I've never taken her seriously as a celebrity advocate of fighting for these issues. And this whole idea of Rapinoe being having to force teammates into supporting it definitely falls in line with the liberal totalitarianism that I'm not on board with. And when you don't have real action to back up what you're advocating for, because let's be real, if your activism just sheep herds people into the Democratic Party, then you're not serious about approving the conditions for black people and other people of color in this country. And it's important that Rapinoe gets criticism to her left, because if all she has is this fake liberal support, then she's not going to have the chance to improve and see why just falling in line for any Democrat is extremely inadequate given these times. So next we have a video from last night's LA Angels and Detroit Tigers game where the Angels star pitcher and power hitter Shohei Ohtani is dealing with more racism here.
Well, folks,
now what do you do with Shohei Ohtani?
be very careful. Well, folks, Shohei Ohtani is coming to the plate, and it's been brought to my attention, and I sincerely apologize if I offended anybody, especially anybody in the Asian community, for what I said about pitching and being careful to Shohei Ohtani. I did not intend for any offensive thing, and I apologize if I did. Certainly respect and have the utmost respect for this guy, and don't blame a pitcher for walking.
Man, that was such a poor apology, if you ask me. This guy, Jack Morse, the analyst of the Detroit Tigers TV broadcast. This is another ugly moment where, as you see once again, more instances of racism towards the Japanese superstar Shohei Ohtani. And this is another example of how white people in this country, they may know how to be, not to be overtly racist against black people, but that same idea is something they're far more ignorant when it comes to Asian people. Like the idea of him going to that extremely poor Asian accent. That's just completely trash. And we shouldn't accept that. Just like, even though I know white people, it's definitely more popular to do the whole Indian accents, especially in the way like Apu from The Simpsons. But this is stuff that we can't accept. And it goes back to the issues when it comes to covering a guy like Shohei Ohtani, is the fact that it's not often that you have Asian athletes have this level of prominence in the world of sports, just because, let's be honest, there's just not very many Asian athletes in professional sports, and the majority of the few are either in baseball or wrestling. And this is just a ugly moment. He really fumbled his way through the apology. And if he really did have the utmost respect for him as a player and the Asian community as a whole, he would have never thought it was okay to break out that garbage accent during a live broadcast on the air. And once again, this goes to show you, for as much as Americans white Americans tend to have a better understanding about the issues of being ignorant towards black people with overt racism, they still got a much longer way to go when it comes to understanding what is overtly and covertly racist towards Asian people. And this is just a ugly moment once again for a sport which is trying to be more inclusive, and the facts that are, for every moment that that Major League Baseball tries to take a step in the right direction and be more inclusive, they fuck it up and take a step backwards, just like they did with when Stephen A. Smith last month suggested Shohei Ohtani cannot be a star, is not marketable because he is not able to speak English just yet. Such other bullshit. And what I'll get into later on is now MLB is in the process of considering a partnership with Barstool. And if there's anything to be known about Barstool, is that would be another way that the sport would contradict itself if they really did follow through on a partnership with that sports publication. Baseball still has a long way to go when it comes to being a more inclusive sport for people of color and other marginalized communities as well, especially since there still uh, remains to be seen how they're going to fully handle the fallout from Trevor Bauer and his sexual assault case. Although, for now, it looks promising, but you won't truly know until the he gets officially charged and the real fallout can take place after that. So let just keep an eye out because Major League Baseball has been very inconsistent on the ways that they're trying to make progress here, and the old timer broadcasters are fucking up here in instances like last night. All right, now it's time to get into something that this here is a very important issue to address. So, Finney and Compton J of the Fred Hampton left went on Generational Change Monday night, hosted by Jen Perlman and her co-host Peter Hager. And the reason why this is important to address is this further extends into the white progressive meltdown that has been happening since Nina Turner lost her special election more than 2 weeks ago. And this is important to address because Afeni and Compton J are trying, in this guest appearance, they made the point of direct action and breaking away from the electoral system. And Jen and Peter were not very receptive to that message. So first I'm going to play a clip of what Afeni was trying to get across during that appearance on Monday night.
Right. And standing in solidarity with black people and indigenous people and standing in solidarity with working class white people is not the same thing. So yes, labor is important and we should very much talk about solidarity through labor. But when you talk about FDR, you also forget that a lot of those labor protections were not afforded to black people. So one of the biggest divides I see on the left is a sense of urgency that lacks on the white counterparts, the white leftists, the white whatever, that are a part of this movement. Like when working class people, especially working class black people who don't have health care, black women that are on Medicaid disproportionately, so they're dying on delivery tables 3 times more than white women, our sense of urgency is a little different. And so when we get upset at our representatives for not actually representing us, it's because people are dying. White people are dying too, but black people are dying disproportionately, not only at the hands of the police, but at the hands of our doctors, at the environmental racism, the infrastructural racism that we're dealing with. So I feel like when white leftists use the word solidarity and black leftists use the word solidarity, it is very, very different meanings. And when we don't take heed to that sense of urgency. As the left, we disenfranchise so many black indigenous people when we tell them that they need to hurry up and wait for some human rights that we have been deserving of, that we've constantly being left out of, because even Lyndon Baines Johnson was a racist white man. regardless of whatever you want to, like, yes, he wrote the piece of paper, and civil rights is what it is, right? But civil rights does not challenge the nucleus of their power. The nucleus of their power is economic and financial power, the war power. So when we pass civil rights legislation, that doesn't actually challenge the power structure of this country. It just doesn't. But actually investing in the black community, actually investing in working class communities, actually investing in indigenous communities, that changed the power structure of this country. And that's the reason why, like, I understand what y'all are saying. Like, yes, electoral politics is important. Like, yes, that is a tactic. But we have to build an infrastructure.
All right, that seems very reasonable and very consistent with what Afeni has been saying ever since she joined the Fred Hampton left. She's been making a point of being more involved with activism, mutual aid, and building power outside the electoral system because with what we've seen is it's a fool's errand. It's failed the left, and with the recent emergence of the squad, it's given too many white people, specifically like Jen and Peter, false hope that they can still that they're on the right track, and that just growing the squad will eventually lead to more success and following through. Even though all the evidence from the past several months has been in front of us saying that they're not going to be true fighters of black liberation and for the policies that they campaigned on. Next, let's go into the moment where shit really went down and what led to Compton J and Afeni both being kicked off the stream.
No, you just rambled off something. No, you just rambled off something.
No, what I'm saying is I think that there comes a point where the entire thing just becomes useless in terms of where we're currently going. And so I totally understand where you and Afeni are coming from and the whole concept of the movement. That's why we are here. We absolutely support reparations. We've actually been very vocal at it.
Please don't pander to me. Please do not pander to me right in my face. Do not do that, because what?
Jay, okay.
Done.
It is clear that they...
No, you just rambled off.
As you can see, the problem here is Peter really fucked up here because he thought that he could placate Compton J by saying he supports reparations, but it's not any different than when some corporation says Black Lives Matter, because when it comes down to it, they don't really care. They're just saying it to give fake allyship. And what you'll notice is beforehand, what wasn't in this clip is things got really contentious because Compton J was talking about how he's lost family members due to the way that due to the failures of electoralism and how policies enacted by Democrats have actively hurt the black community. And he was making the point that he's done with the Democratic Party and done with electoralism, and this is the extension of that white progressive electoralism meltdown. And it's really fucked up that they cannot go through this. They didn't go through that tough conversation that they absolutely needed to have Monday night. But before I really break down everything in the fallout, let's play this little clip of what Jen said after Finney and Compton J got kicked off the stream.
If you want to go,
Because I gotta tell you, what's so frustrating about that to me is that the other day when I was watching Tim basically have like a meltdown on his stream because all his people are freaking dying, and that he doesn't have the time that these people are taking to do their actions, form their third parties and whatever they're doing, and for them to go out of their way in so many cases to sabotage Nina. This is what set him off, because he's like, our people are dying. And so the desperation is the same. And for people to come on and be like, they came on here to ambush us. I kind of suspected that. I called it days ago. I was unhappy about this for days. We debated canceling and not even having them. But I'm like, okay, well, if we do that, then they're just going to. But the truth is, and here's the truth to everybody, I'm not on social media. I'm not. Haven't been for about 6 months now. So while people can sit there and say whatever they want about me, and they say it to be hurtful, that's really their purpose. This is all about being hurtful, and just being arrogant and whatever, and not trying to get along and not trying to just like try to come up with solutions, especially from people that really don't know anything about me. It's like, I just don't need that.
Again,
so talk about me all you want.
You chose to do what you were going to do. I was going to, again, have the conversation, but
I chose to do what I was going to do. What do you mean?
No, I mean, again, you wanted to, end the conversation because.
Oh, as soon as he was talked to me and just said whatever you were rambling about to me, I was about to remove him right then and there. But you were in the middle of talking to him. You don't come on that's coming into my home and talking to me like that. I don't deserve that. There's nothing I did that deserved that kind of vitriol, with the exception of they came on purposefully to do that, which was their plan. And, I do put this 100% on you in front of everybody. He created this. I didn't want these people to come on. And now here we are. And there was no win from this. This was never going to be a win. And then
before I address what just transpired here, let's take you. I'm going to take you back to the beginning of their show. I think this happened roughly a year ago, maybe a bit less. But the point is, their show, Generational Change, really did start off having more activist type of people as guests. She had some pretty good guests early on, such as Katie Halper, Rose McGowan, Rania Kalik. She's had Justin Jackson on multiple times. Her first episode was with professional wrestler Matt Seidel. So, be honest, her show started off promising. I mean, she even had Nick from the Fred Hampton left us on about, I think, a month ago. And that was a pretty smooth conversation. But things started to... The signs of Jen Perlman starting to trend in the wrong direction came the moment that she was supportive of Vaush. And not only that, it really started to take effect once she went on his show, and the fact that she got a lot of Vaushites as subscribers, and that helped put her over the top to eventually get monetization on her YouTube channel. And recently, she started to push back on some of Vaush's bad takes. But then what you notice is over time she's had less of those left activist type of guest and more establishmenty type politicians, or the progressives who are trying to run from the inside. And that's also part of the trend that I noticed going in the wrong direction there, because she started to lose more of the balance. And I also felt like she was trying to cast too wide of a tent, and for this so-called left unity, which really boils down, and when it gets exposed in a negative way, it really just comes down to black people shut up and trust the plan. And that's when it got exposed here. Now let's address what was said in this clip after Finney and Compton J left the show. So first off, she has the audacity to really decide which black anger is valid to her, and saying that Tim Black's anger is valid, but at the same time condemn the anger of Compton J and of Finney. Are you serious? Oh yeah, it's because his anger, Tim Black's that is, tied into her electoralism and this whole straw manning of anyone who doesn't take your belief of electoralism politics as just being a third party. Let's be honest, there's a lot of activists who don't believe or find it hard to trust any third party at this time. But what is easier to do is build up a mutual aid network and move on to direct action. Because if you're a true believer of direct action, you believe that whether it's squad progressives or your average corporate Democrats, is that you're going to move them all the same if your direct action is effective. So let's be honest about that. Because this is very problematic. She really went to these people type of trope, which is honestly some of the more overt type of covert racism that you see here. And you could see a tiny bit of tension because Peter was sounded at least willing to fail through that conversation. But Jen, a podcast is not like your house, especially if you're using your platform in a right and responsible way, and if you're really genuine about building a left-wing movement. Because once again, this is very much along the lines of the whole white progressive false unity. Because the left isn't going to get its victories through electoralism. And this is just an example of the further meltdown that these white progressives have when black people and other people of color do not subscribe to your views on electoralism. But alas, because these people put way too much stock into the idea of electoral politics. Because, let's be honest, even as much as people like myself are down on the idea of electoral politics, it's still a complicated relationship with it because you still kind of have to call out the establishment's bad faith attacks, even on progressives that you're not going to vote for or donate to, just to make sure that they don't control narratives. And the other thing with electoralism is you still need it to bring new people into the fold, at least from an issue standpoint. So those are like small things, small purposes that you would at least still need to do in terms of using electoral politics in a small way while not burning through millions of dollars that could have been used to really solidify a mutual aid network. Just think about it. That could be like millions of dollars that if weren't donated to these progressive politicians could have already been used to build up a true mutual aid networks to help direct actions such as a general strike. But this story has more. Jordan Sheraton. He's been on the radar a lot for having a lot of bad analysis. And this is just another example of it. I've met Jen Perelman several times and covered her congressional campaign. She doesn't have a racist bone in her body, and one of her main campaign proposals was real criminal justice reform and legalizing marijuana from a racial justice perspective. She also went to Cleveland to knock on doors to elect Nina Turner, not because of her race, but because of her politics and moral character. You can disagree with her or be upset with her, but she is a great person and strong progressive. There isn't a white person on earth who hasn't benefited from white supremacy and doesn't have racial blind spots or has had to be educated. But that's not the same thing as being a racist. I look forward to Jen continuing to cover issues that others are ignoring. And I should add specifically, I just watched the end of the interview. Watch the full thing area. I personally would have not abruptly discontinued the interview or used the phrase, "these people," came off the wrong way, although I don't think Jen meant it maliciously or racially. And that's why Jordan's heading down the wrong route here, because these are the type of problems with the lack of understanding that white people have when it comes to being covertly racist, even though these people is probably among the more overt covert racism that there is. She should apologize for that and make clear that what she was trying to say, I'm not a white person trying to tell black people how to feel or declaring for them who is racist. Intention of my tweet was to talk about the person I know who I know cares deeply about racial justice. Look, a great point that Finney and Compton J were trying to make is that if you're putting way too much stock into electoral politics, it's really going to misguide you from trying to really go about racial justice, because one of the big themes of that interview is, oh, I support direct action, but then following quickly tearing down the idea at the same time. And someone who looks down on black people or would intentionally try to disregard their understandable anger and experience. And as I just referenced, she pretty much selectively validated which black anger to support and condemn other types of black anger which cannot be tolerated, which is what she did with Tim Black, while at the same time condemning the black anger of Compton J and Finney. I should also say, I know Peter, he's a good guy, but with that said, I don't think it was right for him to bring up he supports reparations seemingly out of nowhere. It was indeed pandering and a bit racially blind, although I am sure he didn't know and meant it that way. This is the type of managerial protection that far too many white people do when they are not in the position to be the judges of racism, or also be the ones to protect people from coming around on the issues and shielding them from these moments where they should really be learning lessons. And that's the problem with what Jordan Sheridan did here, is the fact that instead of validating the points that were made by many black leftists and other people of color here, is the fact that what he really did was shield her from having the real from having the opportunity for real redemption. And the more white electoral people that do this whole shielding or protection of this are gonna prevent true growth from happening here. So that's the main problem, and this shows the disconnect that Jordan has from some of the activist analysis of what's going on here, because for as much as Jordan and Jen Dice are on the ground, and they do some valuable work there, but the problem is when it comes to, but their analysis matches more with people, the elite white progressive podcasters who aren't really involved in the activism type of scene and are mainly doing analysis from a newsroom or a webcam. So that's a very bad look on his part. He's also had other instances of where he's come out in defense of protecting politicians from stronger pressure and attacking activists who are more aggressively trying to challenge politicians and hold their feet to the fire. But that's not it. I wasn't gonna go into this, but I figure that this can't be ignored, in my opinion. So this comes from Adam Christensen, and he's one of those reformed Republicans. And once this tweet loads, I'll show you the problem with what he is doing here. Because there's like numerous amount of tweets that could have been shown to demonstrate how disconnected he is from black people. But I figured this was the best demonstration of that. So he decided, even after Jen Perlman has at least made small concessions that she fucked up here. There's been a couple of these white progressive shut up and trust the plan type of electoralist types who are willing to take that sword in place of Jen and Peter. And this is just an example of that. I have zero patience anymore for the Fred Hampton leftist I have a podcast bullshit. Lots of us don't have health care. We all want Medicare for all. Doesn't mean you constantly bringing up stupid shit you misunderstood from 7 months ago is helpful. You lost all credibility. Now go away. No, Adam Christensen. You're the real person who lost credibility because you're a failed politician. You lost your first attempt to get into office, and you've went on a tirade of tweets insulting the black left. And we don't have patience for your electoralism bullshit. Shut up, trust the plan, because what also got exposed from these tweets is the fact that you're finger wagging in their faces and telling them you're just going to be like more of those same fucking squad members who aren't going to fight for you once they make it into office. And the last thing we need right now is false idols, false allies who aren't going to follow through on their campaign promises. And the fact that we got fucking idiots like these who are willing to double down on the same fucked up bullshit that went down Monday night. And it's clear to me these people want nothing to do with the left, such as the Fred Hampton left, because Fred Hampton left just started a little over 4 months ago, and it's the best. It's the current best platform best independent channel we've got on the left right now. They've got organizers like Rome Bethea and Affinity with his Tour for the Poor, and Affinity with her mutual aid and activism work in DC, in addition to other people who have done prior activist work like Nick, Socialist MMA. Then you've also got Compton J, Jackie Poles, RJ, and James Fauntleroy, in addition to other new members they've added like Killjoy Meg, Sabby Sabs, who is now getting more involved in local activism in the Boston area. And also the other couple members featured in that group are Sherry Barber and Andy Kennedy. So the Fred Hampton left is the biggest growing independent left movement, and what it's being proved is the white progressives are continuing to melt down over black people advocating to work outside the two-party system. And not only that, they also understand that the system is so rigged that you really can't do anything with third parties other than use it as a tool of leverage. And that's why advocating for mutual aid, and they often talk about serious issues that are important to the black community. And lastly, we aren't going to have a serious left-wing movement unless it prioritizes the needs of black people and other people of color, because when you got these white progressives like Adam Christensen who decide that to shut up and trust the electoralism plan and to focus on just class issues, then discard issues related to the black community, that we ain't gonna have real progress with that. Don't get me wrong, there's certain class issues that will help, but they don't truly bridge the racial inequality gap in this country. And if you're discarding mutual aid and direct action, then you're just flat out not serious about getting any of that done. And that's why, if you're someone who doesn't really watch much independent left content, Fred Hampton leftists need to be your number one priority. That's the one show out there, in my opinion, that if you only get to pick one show, that's the one show that you need to watch. And try to watch all the content that they put up on a daily basis, because I understand that there's so many channels out there and they're recently starting to grow. And Fred Hampton Left is the one to prioritize first and foremost, and continue to advocate for the voices of their network, prioritize listening to them, because if you only listen to the white elite progressives that are in this movement, the long, well-established ones, you're gonna have moments where you're insensitive, indifferent, and come off with a lack of understanding on black issues. And this thing that happened Monday night on Generational Change is an example of the disconnect of that white progressives have with the black leftist, and why we must continue to constantly point out when people like Jen, Peter, Adam are wrong, because if we don't and we let them get away with it, then their message is going to be the over prevailing message here. And we can't let that happen. And it's important that people put their solidarity behind the Fred Hampton Left. This next story just came out earlier this morning, and this comes from a staff member of Nathan Robinson's current affairs and what the staff of Nathan's publication wanted to do was organize into a workers' co-op. So I'm going to read this letter real quick because Nathan Robinson has effectively taken the same stance as a Cenk Uygur, a Dave Portnoy, when it came time to follow through on a socialism. This may be hard to read for the viewers, but I'll read it out loud for y'all. We, the former staff and part-time staff, write to you with deep sadness and disappointment about recent events that have occurred at Current Affairs on August 8th. Editor-in-Chief Nathan J. Robinson, author of Why You Should Be a Socialist, unilaterally fired most of the workforce to avoid an organizational restructuring that would limit his personal power. Yes, we are fired by the editor-in-chief of a socialist magazine for trying to start a worker co-op. We all joined the Current Affairs at different times. The business manager was hired with the explicit instruction to help shepherd the magazine through the process of creating a more democratic workspace in alignment with our socialist values. The organizational restructuring reforms, we did a full organizational survey and one-on-one interviews with editors and staff to try to find a consensus on a collective vision. Everyone's stated goal, including Nathan's, was to create a democratic workplace where all voices were equally valued. But when we finally got around to discussing organizational models during a Zoom meeting on August 7th, Nathan became agitated. He insisted in our attempt to set shared informal values, we were disregarding his vision for Current Affairs as published in the first issue. There was a palatable shift in his demeanor, and he behaved in a hostile manner throughout the rest of the conversation. The next morning, he started removing people from the company, Slack, and sent letters requesting resignations, eliminating positions, and in some cases, offering new honorary titles which would have no say in governance. In individual letters, Nathan claimed he had irreparably lost faith in our ability to work together, but less than 24 hours later, he sent follow-up emails retracting his statements and admitting that he simply did not want Current Affairs to be a democratic workplace. He believes in his guts. The magazine and media venture would have collectively creative is purely his, he wrote. This organization has been slowly heading for some sort of reckoning, which was going to have to be made clear once and for all what kind of authority I wanted to have over it. And I was in denial about the fact that the answer is I think I should be on top of the organizational chart with everyone else selected by and reporting to me. I let Current Affairs build up into sort of an egalitarian community of friends, while knowing in my heart that I still thought of it as my project which I should have control. We note darkly that he says egalitarian community of friends and not, of course, a workplace. Nathan overtures since the purge have been to reach out to repair friendships or hastily offer new ad hoc work. But he is fundamentally missing the point. He has effectively fired us for organizing for better work conditions. We are sad, aghast, betrayed, and of course angry to realize that this person we trusted has been lying to us for years. We, a small staff composed entirely of women and non-binary people, have faithfully worked to make Current Affairs the beautiful, engaging leftist magazine and podcast that it is. We have commissioned articles and illustrations, planned and produced the podcast, organized contracts and ensured swift payment for contributors, edited the vast majority of articles, conceived the amusements, created the social media and marketing, and done most of the work running Current Affairs. Nathan Robinson can write articles and give speeches, but when it comes to running an organization, he simply isn't up for the task. As he wrote in one of his emails, August 8th, I think you saw yesterday, ultimately I felt the Current Affairs was slowly slipping away from me, and I took an insane course of action to do what I thought would get it back. I am not good at running an organization. I freely admit this. We have no better explanation for Nathan's behavior than any of you, but it is clear to us now that this is simply the most extreme event in a pattern of controlling and dishonest actions that began long before this sequence of events and has created an untenable situation for the workers. For a week, Nathan has insisted to the board that he would be able to continue running Current Affairs profitably, and assisted by a new staff, and promised to write harder than ever before. Since then, he has done an about-face, expressing regret and concern that he has created a situation where Current Affairs cannot continue to exist, and Nathan admits he cannot do the job himself, and the workers he purged are unable to pick up the pieces he so carelessly shattered. But all of Current Affairs' assets are reserved to fulfill the obligations to our subscribers and creditors. The compromise position reached last night is that Current Affairs will take a 1-month hiatus, and all staff, including Nathan and the workers he fired, will be paid through September. We are frankly devastated to lose high esteem for Current Affairs. The left can be as lonely and as vicious as anywhere else on earth, and we love to not just contribute but shape a place of amity, camaraderie, joy, beauty, and truth. We have been able to make people laugh and think, and most importantly, feel less lonely. We have also fully loved working with such talented, curious, and generous artists and writers. We know that this news will devastate people who may be reeling from losses of faith, old and now. This feels like a light going out. If you want to stand in solidarity with us, please consider sharing this, emailing messages of support to past.affairs2021 and adding yourself to our mailing list to hear about any new projects. We thank you so much for your attention and affection over the years. Solidarity, Allegra Silcox, business manager, Light to Gold, managing and amusement editor, Kate Christensen, Gartho, admin assistant, Aisling McCrea, former producer of Current Affairs podcast, and Kate Root, poet at large, formerly administrative maid. Alright, so this right here is such a bad look for Nathan J. Robinson. Because while he could have admitted that he didn't believe that he could have came up with so many other excuses to hide and still slightly be able to save face here, because with this being said, he could have just ended the organization altogether, complain about financial issues, and not look like a hypocrite. That's probably the one move he could have made. But now, the reason why he looks so bad here is because instead of practicing what you preach when it comes to socialism, you're effectively deciding not to by just saying that you're going to fire most of your staff, especially those who are advocating for a worker co-op, part of things that should exist under socialism, and instead advocating for the same failed status quo type of structures because you didn't want to give up your authority. And the frustrating part about this is liberals and conservatives alike are having a field day with calling out the hypocrisy from this progressive Nathan Robinson. And when it comes down to it, he has shown so many liberal type of tendencies, especially over the past year. And that's why this is sad to see, because when it comes down to it, workers' co-ops are definitely a step of evolution ahead of, well, employers owning stock. Especially since that's essentially what your imperialist bread tube left advocates for, is, and calls that socialism. And worker co-ops, just for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a workplace structure where everyone, a democratic structure where everyone gets to vote on changes within their company, and the person in charge of the company has essentially the same amount of say as everyone else when it comes to making changes within the workplace. These are things that the great economics professor Richard Wolff advocates for, is stuff like worker co-ops. Also, it's one of the big points that Kamali Rose of the Radical Democracy makes as well. By the way, yeah, after the show, go check out that interview with Kamali Rose. Very good content from him in that interview, as always. So this just goes to show you how bad he looks here, and how, when it comes down to being a true leftist, not, I won't even say true leftist, but being someone who is truly about socialism, Nathan Robinson effectively chose the side of the liberal and of the average conservative business owner, effectively making the decision to run his business the same way they do, and effectively undermining your message here. And just another moment where people who are part of the left make the left look bad. So also, please, you should go subscribe to that. Go connect to that mailing list, because I do hope that the people who got discarded by Nathan Robinson will carry out the vision that they wanted and make that true worker co-op. But likely, in order for them to do it, they're going to be reliant on independent support in order to make that happen. Even though not all decisions in a worker co-op are tied to financials, I do hope that these people will be able to carry out that vision, because we need more and more worker co-ops to pop up throughout this country, in addition to the return of unions. My dad was a union worker for the vast majority of his working life, so I will advocate for the return of unions and worker co-ops, with the exception of police unions. That's the only union that does not need to exist. And how this shines a bad light on the left, because Nathan effectively looks the same as other union busters that we've had in these publications and media outlets. In fact, since I'm about to go into some Barstool, I'm going to bring up that article real quick on Dave Portnoy of Barstool. And it'll be a good way to do a prelude into the pointing out all the instances of Barstool. It's racism, misogyny, and whatnot, which would make it a bad idea for them to come on board with the Major League Baseball. So the article's now up. So just to show you what effectively Nathan Robinson is like, he's exactly like the scumbag Dave Portnoy of Barstool. Barstool Sports founder Dave Portnoy threatened to fire on the spot any employee at his blogging company who sought advice on forming a union. The threat, issued over Twitter, brought a rebuke from New York State labor regulators, who reminded Portnoy that federal law prohibits terminating workers for union-related activities. New York Democrat AOC also weighed in, tweeting bosses who threaten to workers for trying to unionize can be sued on the spot. I'm not going to go into this article, but this is effectively what Nathan Robinson did. And even though he didn't threaten to fire people and do it in the same type of way that Dave Portnoy did. He essentially did the same thing. And what makes it worse is he negotiated with his workers in dialogue over the idea of a worker co-op, then decided to fire the workers, especially the ones who are most vocal about trying to enact a worker co-op, while offering bullshit positions for some who are less vocal, which would give them no power. So I'm not really sure if this institutes the same type of lines of being able to sue Nathan J. Robinson, but to me it sounds worse because, as I said, he got in dialogues of negotiation, but decided he wouldn't allow it to go through and fire it. That is worse than what David Portnoy did, because Portnoy is like your typical Republican. You know where they stand. And Nathan J. Robinson, in typical Democrat form, pretends to be on your side when it comes to advocating for socialism, but when it comes time for him to choose and make a real choice of practicing what you preach, he effectively chose the right. Yeah, that's right. He chose to side with the right. And that's why I hope that no one will take him seriously anymore, because this is really the last straw. Among other things, at least with other issues that the more liberal side of the left can fuck up on, at least there's an easier path to a redemption arc. But after this, there's not much you can do to redeem yourself after this. Because workers need a society that works for them. And if we continue to allow the owner class to rule society, then it's going to make it harder to make progress on reaching a socialist society. And it's worse when it comes from people that you think are on your side, but then stab you in the back. Earlier in the show, I talked about a problematic moment with Tiger's an analyst on TV, Jack Morris, and his racist moment last night when he did an Asian accent during a game against the Los Angeles Angels, featuring superstar Japanese player Shohei Ohtani, and how those moments are problematic for a sport like MLB, who tries to tell us how they're making steps to become more of an inclusive sport. This is another example of a crossroads that Rob Manfred and MLB have when it comes to going down that road. Barstool Sports founder and frequent Fox News guest Dave Portnoy, also friend of John Taffer, who I went in on for likening workers in a capitalist society to obedient dogs. By the way, check out that video after this live stream. Was in talks with a major sport to air games, later confirmed to be MLB. The platform, described as a satirical sports and men's lifestyle blog, is in reality a cesspool of bigotry, basking in the backlash against political correctness, under the pressure of sharing funny videos and embracing a boys will be boys mentality. Barstool Sports has successfully normalized a culture of harassment, misogyny, and rampant misinformation, all while taking cavalier attitudes towards the chaos that ensues. Major League Baseball has recently demonstrated support for Black Lives Matter and is already struggling with recent allegations of failing to protect women. Portnoy has consistently demonstrated that Barstool Sports exists to make a mockery of those concerns, encouraging casual misogyny, racism, and harassment. Before I go through some of those instances listed in this article, I'm going to compare Barstool Sports to some of these other reactionary right-wing personalities like Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, Tim Pool, Candace Owens, just to name a few of those highly prominent online right personalities, and they're highly reactionary. And some of these left channels, I've always said way too many of them provide constant coverage towards the Ben Shapiros, the Charlie Kirks of the world, while not giving enough attention to counter rhetoric towards Barstool. The reason why I say that is it's because Barstool and their audience is not just some conservative audience. Unlike those people I just mentioned, Barstool actually has a liberal audience as well. Get that right. Barstool does not just have an audience of conservatives. They've got liberals supporting their work, subscribing, and viewing their content as well. In 2011, according to Deadspin, Barstool Sports ran a story about the size of Tom Brady's young son's genitals with a headline, "Check out the howitzer on Brady's kid." After a clip of a 16-year-old cheerleader doing the invisible box trick went viral in 2017, Deadspin also reported on the then editor-in-chief Keith K. Markovich approved a blog originally titled "The Most Viral Girl in the World is this hot Texas cheerleader doing the invisible box trick." The girl's mother later confirmed that she had to defend her daughter from obnoxious comments. Blogger Adam Smitty Smith complained that Portnoy posted a video of Twitter of Smith naked in the shower. Portnoy later tweeted that he deleted the video because Smith cried like a baby about his dick being on the internet. Barstool Sports XM radio show Dialed In with Dallas Braden hosted Dallas Braden and co-host Patrick Connor and Brody Stevens sexualized 17-year-old Olympic snowboarder Chloe Kim after a guest host noted the likeness of her name to Kim Kardashian. Braden joked about the very different broads that each women were writing to achieve fame. Connor then referenced Matthew McConaughey's Dazed and Confused character saying, her 18th birthday is April 23rd and the countdown is on, baby, 'cause I got my Wooderson going. That's what I like about them high school girls, Connor continued. She's fine as hell. If she was 18, you wouldn't be ashamed to say that she's a little hot piece of ass. Blogger Jerry Thornton praised People magazine for featuring a woman convicted of having a sexual relationship with her 14-year-old student, grading the newest sex scandal teacher blogs which rate women accused of molesting children. You sure you want to align yourselves with this MLB? Perpetuating and encouraging sexism and misogyny. In a 2010 blog post, Portnoy said, some women deserve to be raped. I never condone rape, but if you're a size 6 and you're wearing skinny jeans, you kind of deserve to be raped. How fucking sick. According to Huffington Post, Portnoy wrote, college is too short to waste your time being a killjoy. Loosen up and fuck abroad. You may enjoy it. That's me being a role model. After Portnoy's then girlfriend allegedly cheated on him with a SoulCycle employee, Portnoy told his followers that he was bringing back Grudge Dave, which Nell magazine described as the alter ego he assumes when launching a coordinated cyberbullying attack. Nell magazine then chronicled how Portnoy wore a SoulCycle shirt the next day, coined the phrase cuck cycle, and encouraged his followers to slut shame his former partner. Followers even found the accused man in question and harassed him, forcing SoulCycle to disable comments on the social media pages. Portnoy then mocked SoulCycle for warning its employees about safety concerns from the harassment. Don't have your instructors fuck the girlfriend of the head of a major media company. Comedian Neil Bredau described full-on harassment she experienced after asking Barstool Sports to credit her for publishing her content. Portnoy called Sunday's NFL Countdown host Sam Ponder a Bible-thumping freak and said her only job was to make men hard in a podcast. Dan Big Cat Katz complained that every second Ponder can tell you she has a kid and that she's a hardworking mother, she will tell you that she has a kid and she's a hardworking mother. Portnoy responded by calling Ponder a fucking slut who should sex it up and be slutty instead of talking about her role as a mother. Ponder also alleged Portnoy had said in a video that child should have been aborted. Portnoy denied making that specific statement, but then called her a vindictive asshole, dishonest scumbag who can't get over a grudge. In a video the next day, Portnoy congratulated himself for calling Ponder only an asshole and not a vindictive bitch. Oh, man. There's so many more. But let's just focus on this one. Portnoy taunted AOC, saying that he imagines she would want to coddle one of his employees whom he had labeled a pussy. Deadspin also reported Portnoy defended convicted rapist Harvey Weinstein. This is my company. I gotta get laid. Fucking get laid. If she's willing to make that trade, it's not publicly. Who do I owe? Barstool Sports runs recurring features called Guess That Ass, Guess That Rack, and Twerk Wednesday. The site also posts a local smoke show of the day. Does that sound any different than when Anna Kasparian did the Guess That Camel Toe type of segments? Because, let's be real, this shit's trash. Really fucking trash. Just like in the way that Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian are trash in the political realm, this outlet is major trash in the sports community while having trash takes in politics, society as well. And this is important to point out too, because Deadspin also noted Barstool's then senior editor of editorial strategy and growth, Chris Spagnolo. By the way, this guy is now part of Osmo in their DFS coverage. Wrote a blog criticizing Rihanna's weight. Is Rihanna going to make being fat the new hot trend? On the topic of women gaining weight, he wrote, "It's a dangerous precedent, and you may want to start adjusting your porn browsing to primarily BBW porn to condition yourself to this dystopian future we now face." That's such bullshit as well. And a point that I know that doesn't really get mentioned very often, but I think if you're part of the left and you're not respectful to the body positive aspect of it, such as with BBWs, then that's going to be bad. And we can't accept the left who isn't respectful of other bodies. And body shaming is another thing that we should not accept in our left-wing movement. I know that we really don't talk much about body positivity when it comes to it being a discussion on the left, and why it's important to make sure that is a prominent point, because I think there's a certain aspect of body positivity that has been co-opted by liberals, and we need some leftists to get involved in that aspect, and I think that would be something worth covering in a future show, in a future interview. It's just a matter of finding the right voice for it, because I'm sure that there are plenty of leftist sex workers who could probably be a good guest for it. That's something to be figured out somewhere down the line, because I would be content that I would be interested in having some interviews about, or finding some interviews about as well, that I think that need some more coverage on the indie left. Barstool published a Then deleted title slut. Reporter drinks Cam Newton's jizz. Then this one right here, making Kobe Bryant rape jokes. Extremely problematic, especially since there is still a portion of people who are still holding it against him, depending on what type of reports you believe from the fallout of that case. So yes, this shit is numerous. And they have a dirt sheet of misogyny that matches up with TYT. Then you've got their racism dirt sheet. This one comparing Al Jazeera to Al Qaeda. And doubling down on it. And this anti-Semitist post from, if I was Jewish, I would kill myself. Well, I love Barstool. I point blank said I don't like Jews in my Christmas movie blog, and the thing that has people angry is not liking Christmas Vacation. Clancy also joked that Jewish people is enemy. That's an example of real anti-Semitism right there. Not being in favor of Palestine. Advocating for Palestinians to have rights and safety is not Semitism. This right here, that's real Semitism. Anti-Semitism. And a former sideline reporter, Emily Austin, for the Tampa Bay Rays, said she didn't even know Mexicans were that smart, and observed the Chinese guy is always the smartest guy in math class. Shitty stereotypes perpetuated by the outlet. And the problem is, you are going to have people who fuck up at times and commit racisms. But what you see about Barstool is they enable it, they embroider it, and they endorse it. They don't push back on it. They don't condemn it. Portnoy and his co-host defended the Trump response where he made fun of the person with Down syndrome as laugh out loud funny. He likened Colin Kaepernick to ISIS. How insane is that? Portnoy using the N-word to sing along to Ja Rule's Living It Up. And a Barstool broadcast host, Kurt Minihane, saying that anyone with a brain would have doubts about NASCAR driver Bubba Wallace claiming to find a noose in his garage. And producer S.E. Robinson complained non-existent structural racism is foundational to the left-wing belief system. And instead of reforming your racism, Dave Portnoy decided to double down when a black person called him out for using the N-word of his employee. That's the type of bullshit that MLB is considering associating itself with. A guy who says, if you don't like me using the N-word, then tough shit, black guy. I've worked hard to give you black people an opportunity to work for me. Be grateful. Fuck you, Dave Portnoy. That's the type of shit that can't be tolerated. Then look at this dirt sheet of homophobic, anti-LGBTQ list. And then actively sharing messages against COVID. They encourage violence and harassment. Seriously, look at that list. Promoting right-wing grievances and conspiracy theories. As I referenced to earlier, his union busting of Dave Portnoy. And him validating QAnon, calling it a White House insider, and mocking cancel culture, saying that such action only makes us stronger, and that past aggressions are jokes that miss the mark. So this was a great dirt sheet of instances of why Major League Baseball should have nothing to do with this publication. Because you're sending the message, Black lives don't matter. You're sending the message, it's okay to be racist. You're saying misogyny is acceptable. You're saying that being homophobic, xenophobic is acceptable as well. And if MLB allows themselves to partner with it, it will be contradicting any type of progress that they have been building up since last year when they started improving during the George Floyd protest. And how, when it comes down to it, Barstool Sports is the TYT of sports, and it's a fact much more inflammatory and offensive. And if you really want to send a message that you want to take, that you care about marginalized communities, MLB will walk away from this. However, if you're gonna use this as an opportunity to placate to white people, I don't give a fuck about being sensitive to any type of marginalized community in in this United States, then you're gonna placate to them and flip the bird to everyone else. All right, Stan Van Gundy had a very bad moment on the Twitter last night where he made a very insensitive tweet about women's rights in Islam. And Enes Kanter, one of the few NBA players, in my opinion, who is not someone who conforms to the NBA's corporate liberal agenda. He called out Stan Van Gundy by saying, "What a freaking ignorant thing to say." BBC World Information tweeted a press release that learned Afghan women will have rights within Islamic law, Taliban says. To this, Stan quote tweeted, which he has deleted since this morning, "Women having rights within Islamic law seems oxymoronic." This tweet by NBA coach of 4 different teams was terrible. And what Enes Kanter said, "What a freaking ignorant thing to say. You running a basketball team seems oxymoronic. Now that you have lots of free time on your hands, you can undo your ignorance and educate yourself before you anything." I think he meant to say before you know anything. It seemed Van Gundy adopted up on Kanter's recommendation and skim a thread on Twitter advisable to him by Mo Dakhil that defined the rights girls had been granted inside Islamic regulation. He would really reply that he certainly did educate himself on the matter. And what that thread is going to show is there's this misconception that women don't have quite as many rights as you think. But we'll go over that thread real quick for better understanding. But let's go back to Stan. He had just joined Twitter last year. And what you noticed is his following started to get built up during the height of the George Floyd protest because he had some pretty good messaging advocating in favor of Black Lives Matter. But there are flaws to Stan Van Gundy. He is a vote blue no matter who liberal. So you also see the flaws in him personally when he says he's supportive of any Democrat. And why Stan can say, have moments of saying right things in terms of going against racism or towards black people, but in this instance, his ignorance really showed about how he really didn't get it in this instance. So let's go through this thread to show the type of rights that are had within Islam. And in a way, this also makes Stan look worse in certain aspects because there are more black NBA players who are Muslim than you would think. Since I read that first tweet, let's start with the most basic of rights. Rights over my own body. Quran declares, inherit not women against their own will. In this declaration, Islam mandates that women cannot ever be coerced into doing anything they don't want to do. I matter. My will matters and is final. Property and economic rights. Quran mandates women receive inheritance that they wholly own and still be provided for financially. Taliban instead strips property ownership from women. Afghan women have been kept unaware of their land rights and far from owning property. Khadija, first wife of the Prophet, was a wealthy CEO and business owner. Islam mandates that everything a woman earns is her own, and what her husband owns equally belongs to her. It affords women complete financial independence, and the West still hasn't stipulated it as a law. Education rights. 1400 years ago, the Prophet declared, education is incumbent upon every Muslim male and female. Education isn't only my right, it's my obligation. Aisha, wife of the Prophet, was a brilliant scholar and jurist. It's because of her we've had so much Islamic sponsorship. Moreover, Fatima al-Fihri, an African Muslim woman queen, established the world's oldest and longest running university. Centuries before Harvard or Oxford, she established Al-Quruni in Morocco. I'm sure I mispronounced that. Taliban, meanwhile, tried to kill young Malala for her crime of education. Marital rights. Islam mandates that a woman cannot be married off without her own will. On the contrary, Taliban are finding unmarried women and girls and turning them into brides of unknown men and selling them as sex slaves. Islam condemned this barbarity, not endorsed it. Islam was the first religion to mandate that a woman cannot be married without her consent and that she can unilaterally divorce for any reason. By the way, such rights weren't afforded to women in the West until the last century. The Prophet condemned domestic violence in all its forms. Quran rejects the idea that women was created from Adam's rib. In Islam, men and women were created equal parts, created from the same soul. The dying words of the Prophet were, women are your created partners, treat them well, partners not slaves, not servants, partners equals. How rights of mothers. Prophet Muhammad said that heaven can be founded under the feet of mothers. He didn't let a companion join in a battle because his mother was old and needed her son to be at home. Taliban, on the other hand, had never regarded mothers' rights. Taliban fighters were sent to the uncalled for wars without consent of their mothers. They put young mothers in trials of not having food for their babies so much that they were forced to beg on the streets. Which reminds me of the Prophet Muhammad's rules of war, in which he forbade killing women, children, or any non-combatant for any reason whatsoever. These are rules, once again, that the Taliban completely ignores out of their barbarity and cowardice. Let it be known that the United States doesn't even follow this rule of war either, because they've killed so many civilians in the process of this 20 plus year occupation in Afghanistan. Taliban claims they'll support women's rights, but haven't even allowed women to be part of any decision-making process. Their own actions show their hypocrisy. This is truly a nightmare for all Afghan women. The many women in government, teachers, and scientists deserve better. As you can see, the Taliban has never fulfilled even a single one of these Islamic obligations for women. Frankly, no nation on earth, Muslim or non-Muslim, has. The standard of equity, equality, and justice that Islam mandates for women, you want me to believe the Taliban? Forget. We must protect Afghan refugees and ensure they can come here safely. I launched Equal Entrance blog to ensure I'm playing my part in elevating voices and spaces for women. Equally, especially now, I need to listen to the women most impacted by these atrocities. If you're Afghan women, I'd be privileged if you shared your story with us. God bless. So I'm going to retweet this thread right now because there's so many Westerners who are really ignorant on the differences between Islam and the Taliban. And this thread greatly illustrated those differences. So let's jump back to Stan Van Gundy. And this illustrated why that tweet last night was really extremely Muslim phobic in the way that a famous liberal atheist, Bill Maher, is Muslim phobic, and why it is important to not allow this ignorance to prevail in a Western country like the United States, and showing how Muslim women who aren't under the caste of the Taliban actually do have a decent amount of rights within their society. Especially when you compare it to the Taliban, and based on the way how long Stan Van Gundy left that tweet up, I don't think it was an innocent mix-up between Islam and Muslim, because if it was, I think he would have corrected it right away if he just mixed up the difference between Taliban and Islam. But since he left that up for so long, and ignored the tweets of people coming at him, showing him how he was wrong, it was definitely more in its ignorance rather than a mix-up of Taliban and Muslim and Islam. And one of the big problems that the West has is their misunderstanding of issues like this, and how someone like Enes Kanter and Mo Dakhil can be very helpful in clearing up those mistakes. The one difference is, at least Stan is not doubling down on this ignorance, and has at least been someone who recognizes when he's wrong and tries to correct himself. He still has a lot of work to do, and even people who don't make the mistake but learn from the other person who makes the mistake still have a long way to go. Alright, so let's finish off, since this kind of ties into Afghanistan. Let's talk about another problematic take from Vaush.
Now, I want to be clear about this. The thing that's frustrated me is that a lot of people on the left pretend that us pulling out of Afghanistan would be a good thing. Like, that the Afghan people are, like, just waiting to yearn and breathe free to remove the American occupation. Make no mistake, the American occupation was relatively small and relatively cheap, all things considered. Now, I want to be clear about this.
This is the exact type of garbage that you get from the bread tube imperialist left, who always defends the United States actions here. And this is such other bullshit because this shit wasn't small. It ain't the amount of troops that George Bush had sent, and while the other presidents to follow have sent less troops in comparison, this shit was far from small. And do you not realize how much this 20-year occupation in Afghanistan cost? $2 trillion. $2 fucking trillion. Vaush Limbaugh, once again, is always gonna come out on the side of fucking imperialism, and why so many people, and why we can't take him seriously. Anyone that's serious on the left cannot view this guy in a serious manner, because what you see from these wealthy white progressive types like Vaush in his Beverly Hills home, making $300,000 a year to give you shitty takes and always choosing the pro-imperialist side. And even when he tries to make an effort to do something that is less imperious, like that stream when he tried to fundraise for Palestinians, which was pretty much a failure because that money he raised had virtually no chance of ever making its way towards the Palestinians. And the fact is, what we were learning about this is Vaush once again proving he's a stupid pro-CIA imperialist puppet time and time again. And what we do know is people who are principled in terms of being anti-imperialist will get called Nazis or Holocaust deniers by idiots like Vaush, who completely misrepresent what had went down in Afghanistan over these past 20 plus years. He'll never tell you that it was a waste of time and that the war should have and that by as soon as 1 to 3 years, the writing was on the wall that the Taliban was going to take over again. But no. The military-industrial complex had to keep carrying on. And they got useful idiots like Vaush making sure to continuously make pro-imperialist messages time and time again. And that's why the left, who is fine with imperialism, at the end of the day, they're just really useful idiots for the establishment. That will do it for today's episode of the Rochford Files with your host, Andrew Rochford. I would like to thank everyone for coming out today, and for those who watch the stream later on. I will be working on compiling several clips from today's show for viewing until Friday. Once again, it'll either be Thursday or Friday when I come out with the NBA free agency stream, which I'll have live right here on YouTube, along with making that my first live Twitter Spaces. Also, please like, share the stream and other clips from the show. In addition to that, please go follow me on Twitter at NugLifeComrade, NUGGLIFE Comrade. In addition to that, follow the Rochford Files Twitter page at A Rochford Files. And with that being said, this is Andrew Rochford,